Tennessee football entering year 3 of Josh Heupel. What does the former Tennessee great offensive lineman think about the progress so far and where Tennessee's headed as a program? Ramon Foster joins the show here on a Thursday, Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday and welcome into it. This is Locked On Vols and I'm your host Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys taking the time and joining me here today. Shout out everydayers. Appreciate you guys coming back and subscribing and following us at Locked On Vols on the YouTube channel and wherever you find your podcasts for making Locked On Vols your first listen. Got a fun show coming up here today. We're going to talk with Ramon Foster, former Tennessee offensive lineman, former Pittsburgh Steelers offensive lineman, and now radio host over at 104.5 The Zone in Nashville, Tennessee. All things Tennessee with Ramon. Going to catch up and look ahead to 2023. Talk to our Locked On Mizzou host, John Miller. So that's what you have to look forward to here on a Thursday show. Without further ado, let's bring on the man, Ramon Foster. What's up, buddy? Appreciate you taking the time.
No doubt, E. Kane. I appreciate you having me on, man. Anytime we can talk sports, I'm here for it.
Well, I know I talk Tennessee football every day. I know you talk Tennessee football almost every single day, but we don't get to do it together a lot of the times, and I just kind of want to get your thoughts. You know, obviously last year was a good year and the offseason and everything, and now we're getting closer to 2023 season. Kind of what's your expectations for Tennessee football year 3 with Josh Heupel, but kind of a reload, if you will, losing a lot of guys?
Man, my expectations for him is just continue on the trajectory. I think hover around the same amount of wins that you had last year. Continue to develop guys. And this is my biggest thing to him. And it may just be a hope situation for me is I hope that the guys that, you know, they send to the NFL draft are guys that you come back or scouts say those are well-taught guys. I think that is the biggest part that comes down to college football to me is development, especially when you're trying to sell recruiting, especially when you're trying to compete with a bunch of teams too, as far as prospects, wins, losses, and just being in the SEC in general. It's got to be the same standard, I think, moving forward because you've kind of said it that way. And I think the last thing, too, for me is exactly what it's been the last couple of years, and that's all Tennessee fans have been asking for. Keep it exciting. Keep it exciting. Like, it's one thing to lose, but it's one thing to lose bad and you don't look like you're in the game at all. The one thing I can say about the team the last couple of years is you got what you were looking for as far as points being able to be put up on the board and also development. Those two things have got to be at the forefront moving forward.
You have a master's degree in offensive line play, did it for 10-plus years in the National Football League, and, of course, here at Tennessee at a high level. When you were at the spring game, when you came out for some practices, Tennessee's obviously having to replace some key guys. Darnell Wright. First of all, how cool was it for you to see Darnell Wright go 10th or top 10 in the NFL draft?
It was huge for Darnell Wright, man. Going to the Bears, a top 10 pick, a guy that you knew he had everything in him to be that type of guy, but to actually see it come to reality for him was huge. Met him a few times, had conversation with him, and just an all-around great dude that knows how to play football. And they got a good one. I'm looking forward to watching him in the preseason, seeing the reports about him. But it also just set a precedence for everybody behind him. I know we're going to talk about the OL right now. Javonte Spraggins, like he's a guy that's been on some lists already. Mays has been on the list already. Like they got some guys that can really make a lot of money for themselves this year. Considering if Darnell goes in and do what he's supposed to do too, you can be one of those schools and to be a top 10 pick after 2 years in Heipel's system says a lot, E. Kane. It says a lot.
Really does, and that's right. Chicago had the 9th pick. They traded back, and still we're going to get Darnell Wright, top 10 pick. Really, really good stuff. But as you mentioned, Javonte Spraggins, Cooper Mays, they're coming back. They've been 3-year starters, and that's great. Yeah. Tennessee's got to replace Darnell. They got to replace Jerome Carvin, who was underrated his entire time here at Tennessee. What did you see from that offensive line play when you were in attendance a couple times this spring? And you know, not that it's a finished product by any stretch of the imagination, but right. Are they? You know, how close do you think they are to kind of figuring it out?
What I saw was a bunch of competition and drive from that group in the spring game. You can tell that group is close. Just watching them around the facility, you can tell they take pride in it, and Coach Ellerby does too. That's the part that's most fascinating to me. He understands that's his baby. That offensive line is. He must curate those guys. He must develop those guys and push them forward. You got that. You got that from Cooper. You got that from Spraggins when you see him on the field and he's leading through emotions. Like, those types of things matter, especially for guys with transfers is looking to come in and start, and also for the young guys too that got to find their way on that team. Like, who do you follow? Well, you follow the guys that are leading out front, and Coop and Spraggins being one of those guys is huge for this offense. And I say this too, with an eccentric style offense that Heipel runs, those guys still get an opportunity to feast. Those guys still get an opportunity to do what they like doing best, and it's running the ball. I didn't know how Heipel and his staff is going to make that work as far as the offense that they run through the air and being able to capitalize on the ground, but it has worked. Guys were able to eat really good last year as far as the run game, and it looks to be the same way coming out of the spring game too. There is an emphasis on playing big man ball with this group, despite what the air numbers look like as far as passing through the air.
John Campbell coming over, and the thought is that, it's, again, not a finished product, but he's going to be your left tackle this year from Miami. And then flipping sides, Gerald Mincey, J.J. Crawford from left to right. Neither one of them really took control of the job last year, but Tennessee still led the nation in offense, kind of, playing 50-50 at that left tackle spot. How difficult is it to flip from one side to the other? And what's this say about John Campbell that he's kind of coming in here and, two guys that helped lead the nation in offense last year, he's going to take their spot essentially? I think it speaks volumes with John Campbell and his potential.
John Campbell, number one, heard great things about it. Saw him up there on campus too. Looks the part. He's very, very passionate about being good, man. That's one thing I noticed about the young guy, man, is he wants to play. He didn't come from Miami to just sit around and watch other guys go in front of him, and that's great for us. I'd say this when it comes down to Mincey and others trying to vie for a spot. That could be a good thing because at the end of the day, the best man will win. So if they're in a competition to try to figure out who's going to be the starting right tackle or who's going to play in general, whether that's changing positions or whether that's just them getting on the field, competition brings the best out of guys, and that's what you're looking for. And the other thing of it too, Ekane, you mentioned a second ago, the idea of switching sides. It's hard only if you fight it. If you tell yourself, look, I just want to be on the field. That's one of the things I had to do when I went to the NFL. I played right for the most part of my career, and I also played tackle. I said to myself, either look, I can try to be an NFL tackle or I can play guard and move over to the left side. So what had happened with me was reps, was understanding. Yes, this sucks for a little while, but guess what? If you want to play, you're going to move over and transition, and it's just reps. Like I used to walk up and down the field, putting my left hand down, getting the left hand in the stance just to get used to what the feeling felt like. And those are the types of things you need to be able to, pass on to guys. If they were to reach out and ask me, I'd be like, it's as simple as like walking up and down the street. You got to create a habit and to transition yourself over from a right side guy or from a left side guy to a right side guy. It can be done.
Great stuff here from Ramon Foster, as always, the VFL. One more question for you, man, and I appreciate the time. Without getting, we could talk about this for an hour, but the sport, I guess, of college athletics, everything, or college football, everything that goes into college football nowadays, it is so much different from when you were here, from when you were playing. Could you ever coach having to deal with, recruiting and now name, image, and likeness and transfer portal? And I just feel like if you are a head coach, you are just strictly a GM, which is why for me it's so impressive watching Josh Heupel work, because he's calling plays, he's over there coaching like crazy, and I mean that's still the root of everything that he does.
Man, could I coach in this era or would I? Both questions. I think I could because I'm pro the things that they're doing. NIL, I'm for it. As I said before, as a guy that had to stay up in Knoxville for Christmas because I didn't have any money to go home, that matters to me, seeing those guys get some money back or at least just having a couple $100 in their pockets when there's millions being made. The idea that I would have to just be brutally honest with guys, I'm not sure if the players that they want me to recruit, they will like my approach to what I would tell them, and the idea that, look, you still got to go prove it. This money is only as good as your play. So if you got 100,000 a year at one and you only give us 200 yards in 12 games, you're going to have to take a hit in this. And that's all a part of it too. You have to be business minded. You got to be savvy in your approach to doing that. This past week, or just the other day, On3 had a NIL conference here in Nashville. And from my understanding, the guys that had conversations with those prospects that were in town, they're a little bit more savvy than I was. The parents are more involved with understanding what money is, how soon they need to say no, what's a good deal, don't sign every single deal. All of those things matter in today's game. And I think we've gotten to a part now to where you've honestly progressed enough. Guys talk a lot as far as being on social media from one prospect class to another class to say, how did you manage this NIL deal? Why did you not take this NIL deal? To where I honestly do think it'll be more seamless than we give it credit for. I think the coaches barking around the conversation are the ones that aren't used to this type of stuff happening. And those coaches will probably find themselves out of the game if they do not adjust. They're waiting for, the government to come in and regulate this. Sometimes you just got to get in the pig pen with those types of guys and play the game until you figure it out in the end. And that's essentially what it's turned into. But I would love this era of coaching and having to recruit, because what you don't have, you honestly even the playing field with the collectives. And I think that is the biggest factor now moving forward, especially for starving fan bases that do it right.
Ramon Foster, you can hear him every single morning on 104.5 The Zone with Ramon, Kayla, and Will. That's the morning show. Appreciate it as always, man. Thanks so much.
No doubt, Kane, anytime.
All right, that is VFL and former Pittsburgh Steeler great Ramon Foster taking a couple of minutes joining us here on Locked On Vols. Hey, when we come back, we'll catch up with John Miller, take a look at the Missouri Tigers here from this spring practice or post-spring practice here in the spring, and then we'll talk a little Josiah-Jordan James coming back for a fifth year. Yeah, caught everybody by surprise. That is coming up in segment number 3. But hey, I want to remind you guys about a proud sponsor of the show. That is FanDuel Sportsbook. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That is $2,500 back in bonus bet if your first bet doesn't win. They have awesome promotions going on every single day over at FanDuel Sportsbook, and it's on a safe and secure, easy-to-use app where you get paid instantly. You don't have to wait around for the end of the week, the end of the month, whatever the case is, like on some other sports books. No. It's instantly over at FanDuel Sportsbook. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than at America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back into your Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys being here. And now we're going to take a look at Tennessee's 2023 opponents, continue that series. And today we will look at the Missouri Tigers. Missouri, when you look at this schedule for Tennessee upcoming in 2023, it's the game that's going to be well into the season, looking into November, on November the 11th, and it's going to be on the road, as Missouri was in Knoxville last season for Senior Day, but it'll be on the road in Como, and it'll be on November the 11th. So I want to welcome to the show host of Locked On Mizzou, John Miller, to talk all things Tigers here today. John, what's up, man?
Oh, not too much, Eric. Good to talk to you as always.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Kind of what's the feel? What's the vibe from Missouri post-spring practice? I know Missouri had one of the earlier spring practices, kind of that window in the SEC. I want to say that the spring game had to be moved indoors because of snow. Pretty sure Tennessee baseball was up there that week, and that was a disastrous weekend as well. But what's kind of the mood around the Missouri football program this spring?
Well, it's a little bit weird in terms of Missouri football. That's the vibe I get around Columbia anyway, and I think you touched on it a little bit. Certainly part of it is that, indeed, the spring game was moved indoors. That's always a good thing to obviously, get hype, get fans excited for the upcoming season. And typically it's usually, a lot of positive reactions out of spring football. You can kind of see whatever you want to see since your offense is playing your defense, right? You can take a positive take if that's your kind of deal. But overall, it's been really interesting because Missouri's basketball team had such an a surprisingly exciting season last year in Dennis Gates' first year. I actually think that's taken a bit of a shine off the football program here in the offseason, and that plus a potential quarterback battle here that, nobody's totally satisfied with Brady Cook. It doesn't seem like. I tend to defend him more than most, but I just think there's a lot of reasons that people have soured on the Missouri program a little bit here. It's kind of the show me attitude here at the moment, Eric.
Yeah, going on that quarterback competition, Brady Cook, in a game in Knoxville last year, put up some points. Not hard to do against Tennessee's pass defense. I understand that, but saw some athletic ability there. He's got the most experience, obviously, but you mentioned a quarterback battle, incoming transfer from Miami, Jake Garcia, Sam Horn, former Tennessee recruit target, is going to be in that conversation. How realistic is this an actual competition, or is it just to put pressure on Brady Cook?
I think it's definitely a competition at first glance, for sure. I think maybe the cynic would tell you that, well, Eli Drinkwitz tends to, at least so far in his relatively short Missouri career here, has tended to sort of stick with the more experienced player at that position for the most part, even through some fairly significant injuries, as we saw Brady Cook played through last year. He had a labrum injury all of last season, seems to be recovered from off-season surgery now, but also Brady missed spring ball. But I do think it's a possibility, although if I were handicapping it, I would give Brady Cook the edge right now. I felt like the last few games of the season when Eli Drinkwitz actually gave up play calling duties, well, I think that's where Cook and Missouri probably played its best offensive football toward the end of the year. Tigers got a new offensive coordinator in Kirby Moore. So, optimistically, hopefully that'll open some things up for the Tiger offense this year.
Lose your top wide receiver, Dominic Lovett. He transfers to Georgia, but you do return Luther Burden, who's the former five-star prospect. What's the weapons looking like for Missouri's offense this year, and what will be year number 3 for Eli Drinkwitz?
Yeah, well, the Dominic Lovett transfer was pretty devastating at the time, to be honest. It was emotionally devastating, maybe not 100% devastating on the football field, but he's a really good player, and that definitely hurts Missouri. Though, in theory, Luther Burden will be able to slide over into Lovett's slot position and maybe get a decent amount of his production. Lovett did have a real big breakout season as a true sophomore last year. Certainly, it's really realistic to think that Burden can do the same. But to go back to your original question about the sort of energy around the Missouri program right now, this is now the second year in a row that Missouri has lost what I would say is its best true freshman to the transfer portal. I shouldn't say true freshman because Lovett was there's two guys from the same class, the 2021 class. Previously, it was Mekhi Wingo, a defensive lineman, transfers to LSU. Then this season, Lovett to Georgia. As a Missouri fan, that's tough to take, seeing two of your best guys in that particular class leave for rival programs. So I think that has a lot to do with the attitude around some people's maybe waning interest, at least in the offseason discussion of this program.
When you look defensively, I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on Missouri's defense. There are some names that I remember from, of course, Tennessee playing Missouri the last couple of years. Tyron Hopper, the linebacker, I know he's a good player, just one of those guys. But it feels like there's some buzz and some chatter about Missouri's defense, about how it can be maybe top half of the SEC and take a big step this year. Are you kind of feeling that?
Well, I think so for sure. I would argue they were a top half SEC defense last season. And considering how much returning production the Tigers have coming back, especially in the back seven there, in the defensive backfield in particular, I think that Missouri pass defense should be quite good once again. I think really the only time Missouri really got exploited, I think, through the air was, well, you guessed it, against the Tennessee Volunteers. I really think the Tigers, though, have one of the absolute best cornerback tandems in the conference in Chris Abrams-Drain and Ennis Rakestraw. What I thought you saw last year was about at least 3 different times I saw Missouri safeties, 3 different safeties, in fact, get beat over the top by Tennessee in that explosive passing offense that they have. So to me, in that back end, you'll just have more experience at most of those spots. The only question really is there's a couple edge rushers that moved on. Isaiah McGuire was an NFL draft pick. just a month in this past month or so. So there's a question there. But again, I do just think Missouri is so good on the outside there with their corners that maybe traditional pass rush isn't quite as important for them as it would be for most teams because, well, I think they'll be able to bring extra blitzers with somewhat of impunity. I think we saw that quite a bit last year.
Look at Missouri's 2023 schedule. Open up with South Dakota. You get Middle Tennessee in week 2, Kansas State. That'll be a toughie in week 3, Memphis in week 4. Then you get in the SEC slate, going on the road at Vanderbilt. That's a good opener for any SEC team. LSU at Kentucky, South Carolina. Then your bye week comes a little later in the season, but boy, you rest up because then you're going to Georgia, playing Tennessee, playing Florida, and then going to Arkansas to end the regular season. Looks like it's a pretty tough stretch to end the season, but opportunity to get off to a good start if you're Missouri.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Missouri had an early game at Manhattan, Kansas against Kansas State last year. And again, that was the game where Brady Cook hurt his shoulder. It was just kind of a disaster, really, offensively from the word go from the Tigers. I think the hope is, obviously, this season, you got them in Columbia this year. And by the way, Missouri got better after that Kansas State game. You look at Missouri overall last year, a 6-7 record, including a bowl defeat to Wake Forest at the end of the year. Not all that impressive, but then you really look at some of the results, some really fluky losses, at least a couple fluky losses. And don't forget, they gave Georgia all they could handle in Columbia last season. So there's definitely an argument to be made that this is the type of Missouri team that can outperform expectations this coming fall.
All right, John, closing remarks. Thoughts on Eli Drinkwitz so far? Everybody's still on board with him. I think that he's a good offensive mind. From afar. Again, I'm not there on the beat every day, but it seems like he talks a lot and says a lot of things. Sometimes it kind of comes back to bite him. But as far as Drinkwitz as a coach, I know we got that extension in November, so it seems like administration's on board and believing in him. What's the vibe with the fan base with the head coach Eli Drinkwitz?
Well, I think this is a really important year for Drinkwitz. Not to say that he's necessarily going to be gone after this year if Missouri goes 6-6 again, but I do think another 500 type campaign would just be really tough to justify bringing him back. Although, again, like I said, with that contract extension, I don't really see a financial path to getting rid of him after this year. It almost just seems like it'd be better for Missouri if he just completely tanked or went, 8-4. So maybe we would at least get some type of clarity. To your point about Drinkwitz being a good offensive mind, I generally would agree with that. And I think when he started his Missouri career, I think he did a great job with what he had to work with for the Tigers. But I do think the job of being a head coach has changed so much over these past couple seasons. Post-pandemic, of course, the pandemic season was Drinkwitz's first year. You basically have to be a general manager now and know rosters of the entire landscape of college football. You basically have to re-recruit your own roster every year for all intents and purposes. So I do think Drinkwitz's offense last year in particular became a little bit stale. And I think just freeing him up, the guy, there's only 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, all that stuff. So I just think freeing up his time, bringing in some new ideas, in theory, should be nothing but good for this program.
So this will be year 4 for Eli Drinkwitz. I was thinking that he was in that class with Beamer and Heipel, and I think, of course, Napier going into year 2. But it'll be year number 4 for Eli Drinkwitz. Yep. And John, appreciate it, man. Anything you guys want to know, any preview on what I like to say is, like, anytime, Missouri and Tennessee are playing in football or in basketball, sometimes even in baseball, you want to get the scout on the opponents. Go check out any of other Locked On podcasts in the network on the College Channel, and John does an awesome job with Locked On Mizzou. Appreciate it, man, as always. Thanks so much.
Appreciate you. Thanks, man.
All right, guys, welcome back into it, your Thursday edition of Locked On Vols. You want to talk about a busy day? Wednesday was a busy day. It's like every time I sat down to do something or record something, something else newsworthy would happen. And so I kind of had the show mapped out a little bit. Knew I was going to talk to Ramon Foster. Knew I was going to talk to John. And so I had those kind of scheduled out, and I did those earlier in the day. And then I'm sitting down here to, finish off the show, and Josiah-Jordan James says that he's coming back. Tennessee football kickoff times for 3 games. were announced. And it's like, well, gosh, if some of this were happening, I would have altered the show a little bit. But hey, sometimes that's just how it is. Sometimes that's what it is to be in this industry. And there was no short of news, surely on Wednesday here in the Tennessee Knoxville market. Let's start with Josiah-Jordan James. I feel like that's, I know this is a football show, but I feel like this is the bigger news, obviously, than a couple of kickoff times that, to me, it doesn't really matter, but whatevs. Josiah-Jordan James, total shocking turn of events. Seriously. He is going to be back on Tennessee's basketball team next year. What this means is Tennessee's backcourt, it's one of the most explosive, one of the most experienced, one of the most, stat-wise, one of the best backcourts in all the SECs. The guy Ziegler, Santiago Vescovi returns. Now you have, obviously, Josiah-Jordan James. You go out and add from the transfer portal and Chris Ledlam down low. I know I'm talking backcourt right now, but Ledlam down low. Gainey, Connect. Of course, you got Freddie DeLoyne, who's going to, step up and play a big role for Tennessee this year. That backcourt, wow. And then, of course, the versatility with Josiah-Jordan James. He can play the 4 when Tennessee wants to go small, and he's such a great defender. Pretty much, he's been going through the NBA draft process. He got a G League camp invite and all that type of stuff, and he was trying to go get some feedback, and apparently he didn't get the feedback that he liked, didn't feel comfortable continuing to go through the NBA draft process, knowing that a couple of teams expressed interest in maybe signing him into a 2-way deal, but there was no guarantees or anything. So Josiah-Jordan James essentially makes the decision to try to come back to Tennessee. And talking with people who cover the program on a daily basis, like Rob Lewis over at VolQuest.com, Grant Ramey, my coworkers over there, this was something that really wasn't a possibility until this weekend. And then on Tuesday, it became a real big possibility, and on Wednesday, it happened. I mean, we're sitting here, and I'm going about my day on Wednesday, and I see the announcement, and I'm like, wow, because I gotta be honest with you guys, there's news and then there's breaking news. Very rarely is there news that media doesn't know about first, especially if you cover recruiting, especially if you cover, the day-to-day, the roster stuff. Typically, we know this. It's about to happen. We're waiting on the prospect to announce or the transfer to announce or Tennessee to announce on something a lot of the time. Now, breaking news is something completely different. I mean, I'm not trying to say that, people in this industry, if you're good at your job, you know everything, because you certainly don't. But usually when there's roster movements, we know about it. And then we have all of our stuff ready. When the kid announces, when the kid makes his, post or whatever, you throw out all your stuff. I'm sitting here and I see Josiah-Jordan James and he's like, let's run it back. And then he, post all that stuff on Twitter. I'm like, what? And so I get with all the guys, and I'm like, did you see this? Or like, in typical, our publications, no different than anybody else's, scrambling to get stuff done and get things written and get things posted. And so we got it up there in a hurry. But I mean, because the numbers were set. Tennessee had finality to its roster. BJ Edwards into the portal. Your numbers were back down to 13. You were set. It was over. And so because of that, and to my understanding, because Josiah-Jordan James stepped away from the program, took time away from the team, and he's exhausted 4 years of eligibility, knowing you have a COVID year of eligibility remaining, for him to come back, he would have to be a walk-on because the scholarships are full. It's final. And so that looks like the route that it's going to take. Now, we're not naive here, guys. We know name, image, and likeness is out there now, and it's legal, and there can be some things for him there. So I would expect that to be the case, but I mean, it's not just cut and dry, black and white, boom, bang, bang. That's how it happened. There's a lot of uncertainties out there, I would imagine, for Josiah-Jordan James. So, interesting stuff. Tennessee's basketball team just got a whole lot better. And sure, has Josiah been a bust? Absolutely not. Has he been everything that you thought the 5-star prospect would be when he came in as a true freshman a couple years ago? Absolutely not. But he's turned into a good defender. He's turned into having a really good shot. He's turned into being a versatile player, both in short lineups and small lineups and staying out there on the wing. And, Tennessee just got a whole lot better, basically. So, interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. And, I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you will take that in a heartbeat, having Josiah-Jordan James surprising everybody and coming back to the University of Tennessee. Other news that came out in terms of football on a Wednesday as we kind of, bring our show to a close here. You had on Tuesday of this week, the CBS SEC on TBS schedule was released, some of the games. And you noticed that on September the 16th, it was not Tennessee and Florida that was going to be the SEC game of the week on CBS. And so you knew that wasn't going to be the 3:30 time slot. Tennessee releases TV destinations and times for the first 3 weeks of the season. And Tennessee and Florida on September the 16th will be a 7 o'clock game, and that will be played on ESPN. So Tennessee and Florida, 7 o'clock in the Swamp, much like in 2021. That'll be on ESPN. Tennessee will open the season against Virginia, obviously in Nashville. And that game is going to be at noon on ABC. So it's going to be an 11 a.m. local time kick at a neutral site playing Virginia. I mean, again, we this isn't new that Tennessee was playing Virginia. We've known this for months and months and months. We've known this. But it was always stupid that you were playing in Nashville, in my opinion, okay? And it's even stupider that it's going to be an 11 a.m. local time kick. Just preposterous, stupid. I mean, now I'm going to have to go down the night before. Ridiculous. I'm going to have to go down, spend a hotel room the night before. I mean, anyway, so that's that. That's going to be on ABC. Noon Eastern time kick, 11 a.m. local time against Virginia. I mentioned the Florida game. And then, of course, Tennessee's home opener on September the 9th against Austin Peay. It will be televised on the SEC Network Plus. That's that one game of the year that has to be streamed. There has not been an announced kickoff time to date. So that's what we know so far. I'm kind of glad that Tennessee-Florida is a night game, and I'm glad it's on ESPN because, of course, if you can have the 3:30 time slot, much better than noon, but you're not going to put Tennessee and Florida at noon. And I was talking with a buddy yesterday, the fact that Tennessee and Florida were not the SEC game of the week on CBS that week, I think it was South Carolina and Georgia, it's more an indictment on Florida, if you ask me. I'm not saying Tennessee's going to beat Florida. I'm not saying Tennessee's going to lose to Florida. I'm just saying Tennessee has not had much success against Florida, especially in the Swamp. However, I do not think Florida is going to be particularly good this year. So I think it's more of an indictment on Florida than Tennessee. So busy news day on a Wednesday. And, of course, you got it all right here on Locked On Vols. We're going to talk a whole lot of Tennessee softball, Lady Vols, and the College World Series, Tennessee baseball in the Clemson Regional. We're going to do a whole lot of stuff. Hopefully catch up with somebody down from the SEC Spring Meetings in Destin, Florida. That is what you have to look forward to as we conclude a week's worth of Locked On Vols. That is coming up tomorrow right here on the show. Everydayers, appreciate you guys for being here. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Vols. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.